I would like to welcome all of the people who are here in attendance, as well as our speakers. We have Joan and Dana and Deidre, and Katy should be coming on hopefully soon. So we will get to them in a little bit. If you're not familiar with what the National Women's Political Caucus is, we were founded in 1971. It is a multi-partisan grassroots organization dedicated to increasing women's participation in the political process. We recruit, train, and support pro-choice women candidates for elected and appointed offices at all levels of government. You can join the caucus. Your membership in the caucus actually gets you membership to your local chapter, if you should have one, the state chapter, as well as the national chapter. And Helena is going to place in the chat information about how you could join the Missouri State Caucus. Obviously, one of our speakers today here is from Tennessee. They have their own caucus, but it probably won't do you all any good because you're probably mostly from Missouri. But every state has their own caucus. Okay, so Helena has been working very hard. She is not only the president of our local chapter here in St. Louis, she is also the VP of Education and Training for the Missouri State Caucus. So one of her brainchilds here is this speaker series. So upcoming events for us, on April 11th, we will have another one of these panel discussions about gender disparities. And May 21st, which for those of you here in St. Louis is the day after our Gutsy Women's Gala. May 21st, we will be having an event down in Springfield that if you were here for the networking time Joan was referring to, this is going to have a brunch portion in the morning with some speakers, as well as a training in the afternoon. And then the last thing you can see here on the right is for the statewide ambassador program, which we're just getting ready to launch. Like I said, this is for 18 to 25-year-olds. The St. Louis one has launched, and we are already seeking out applicants for that. So we would love to not only bring in youth, because that's always a good thing, but obviously it's great to have that diversity and variety when we're all having these conversations about what's important for women. At this point, if you have not already, I would encourage you to go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, our mailing list. I'm sorry, you're good, Helena. I just wanted to say that before I introduce to us Tiana, who is our state. Oh, no, sorry. I'll get you in 1 second, Tiana. I forgot I'm supposed to do all these things first. These are going to be our panelist speakers tonight. We have Deidre Malone, who is the Tennessee Women's Political Caucus President. Joan Gentry, who is from League of Women Voters in Springfield. And she's the Voter Services Chairwoman. Dana Sandweiss is here from Access Mo. She's on their advisory board as well as their president and a founding member. And Katy Erker-Lynch hopefully will be joining us here in a bit from Promo. She's their executive director. And each of these women will be speaking about slightly different legislative priorities that we have. We will have everybody be muted. And so it'll just be me and the speaker speaking. And if you would like to ask questions, we're going to do a Q&A a little different than we did last time. So I'm going to do a Q&A for each person. So if you have questions that you want, you can send them to the host, and Helena will feed those to me if we have any of them. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Tiana, who is our Missouri State Caucus President.
All right. Hello. How is everyone doing this evening? It is nice to see a full house here. I see a lot of familiar faces. It is great to see everybody. I'm going to just get right into talking about Deidre because I'm excited that she's on tonight. And I've invited a couple of you to even meet her. You know, 2017, I started a little ruckus within the caucus, and we started an idea committee where I didn't know what we were going to do, but we felt like we wanted to show the National Women's Political Caucus how to be a little bit more diverse and be there for women of color. And anybody that know me, you know, so I'm on this national board now with all these people. So I see Deidre, I'm like, okay, she's Black. And it's immediately just kind of bonded with her, and she understood what I was trying to do, and we did our thing, and then we had to basically be dissolved. But she just was really like somebody that I bonded with when I was on the national board for the caucus. And so to hear that she is trying to be our national president, I don't know. I feel like I'm the first African American for the state of Missouri. I feel like let's keep this momentum going, because we've done some great things up under once the new board that I work with. They are amazing. Shout out to Melissa and Helena for these events. They make me look so good, don't they, y'all? I love them. But I feel excited about Deidre. And I used to not vote. I used to not care about voting, all that different stuff. And then look at me now. I'm the president of this organization. So if she can get me excited, I'm excited about what she can do nationally for this organization. And she knows. I was surprised. She talked about, hey, Tiana, I've talked with people in other states. They told me I need to talk to you. I'm running for president. I'm like, me? So I mean, if I'm flattered to have her here. She accepted, she's all in. I'm taking to my board to ask them to support her statewide for president at our next meeting. And we'll see where it goes, Deidre. I wish you the best of luck. And I'm so glad that everybody else gets to see what I love about you tonight.
Thank you, Madam President. You're awesome. So, good evening, ladies. It is such a pleasure for me to be with you with the Missouri National Women's Political Caucus. It is such an honor. I absolutely adore your president. I had an opportunity to meet her when we had our great convention in St. Louis, and she's a joy and an incredible leader, and I'm just blessed to call her friend. I am Deidre Malone, and I'm the Tennessee Women's Political Caucus president, and this is my second time serving in that role. I ran for Shelby County Commission, served for 8 years, was the first African-American female to chair the Shelby County Commission. Memphis is the county seat, and to date, in the history of our county, I'm still the only African-American female to chair the commission, which is a sad testimony for our state. I had an opportunity to, after I ran for county mayor and lost the first time, I had an opportunity to get involved with the Tennessee caucus. Gabby Salinas, who was active, asked me to consider serving as president, and I told her I would only serve as president if the caucus was serious about realigning with the National Women's Political Caucus. And the leadership told me that they were, and so hence I became the president. And now I'm back president, and we are doing amazing things in Tennessee. Just on March 1st, we had our Women's Day on the Hill. We had about 90 women convene in Nashville, where we did, the first part of the day was advocacy workshops, and then we took that advocacy to Nashville on the Hill. It was a full day, and it was amazing. And very proud of the National Women's Political Caucus Foundation for granting our Middle Tennessee caucus a grant to support that day on the Hill. And I think that our foundation will be very proud of the report once we submit it. I serve on the foundation board as an ex officio officer for our president, Donna Lent. How I got involved with the national level was that I went to the convention in New York, and Donna was running, and the vice president of communications, after a month in, stepped down and resigned. And so I told Donna that's what I do for a living, and asked her if I could serve in that capacity. And she vetted me and gave me the green light and took it to the board. And that's how I became active and a board member for the national organization. And after serving 2 years, I was nominated by board members to serve as first vice president of the national board. and I served for 4 years, and it was an exciting opportunity to work closely with women like yourself from across the country who have an interest in making sure that we recruit, we train, and we elect pro-choice women to every level of office. And so, you know, Tiana mentioned that I am running for the national presidency and excited for that opportunity for a number of reasons. You know, I've served as the president of the NAACP here in Memphis, which is the second largest branch in the country. And for me, it was about training young people to serve. And so if I'm fortunate enough to get the opportunity to lead our national organization, a priority for me will be, you know, working with our national board to put together a strategic plan on, from the national level, how can we support our state and local caucuses to recruit young folk, because that's our pipeline, right, for leadership. And then working with them specifically to make sure that our state and local caucuses have the resources that they need. That's very important. But I think the only way we can do that is with a strong strategy, and having that strategy from the national board, but getting that input from our caucuses is going to be key. I'm not a wallflower. I mean, what you see is what you get. I am probably the one of the most calmest people you'll ever meet, but can be very, very direct because I'm serious when it comes to policy. And so I'd like the opportunity to serve, and I feel really good about where we are as a national organization. You know, I have to give kudos to Donna Lent and the national board for making sure that we're financially sound and we're doing the great work. But what I do think, though, is from a brand awareness standpoint, we should be elevated. And so that's going to be a priority too. When you think about what Emily's List is doing, what Emerge is doing, and as a founding member of the Emerge Tennessee board, I can tell you that there's more that we can do. And we have talented people across this country that can lend themselves and volunteer to work with us. And so, again, I'm excited for the opportunity. And I'm here to answer any questions from you that you have of me.
Well, first of all, aren't you impressive? We are so lucky that you are here to talk to us. I feel like I'm not worthy. I feel like, you know, we're in the movie now. Tell me, first of all, I'm going to speak on behalf of our caucus, and we send our condolences, obviously, to everyone in Nashville.
Yes.
How, I know that's a little bit off topic, but
it's not.
You said you were there, so I'm just sort of curious what your thoughts were today.
So if you know anything about our state, we have an open carry law that our state legislature enacted. And I think there's a piece of legislation that is advancing that if you're 18 and older, you know, you can have a gun and carry it. You don't have to have a permit. And so it's unfortunate that what happened in Nashville yesterday, we were driving up for a set of meetings. A 28-year-old mentally challenged young woman went to a private Christian school and killed 3 students, 9-year-olds, and 3 adults. And then police actually took her down. And so, you know, our legislators are not really talking about the fact that we do have a problem in our state when it comes to gun violence. And so having the opportunity to go up again on Thursday and have some conversations, the Democrats in our legislature know what they need to do, but the Republicans just have a fear and feel like, you know, there's nothing that we can do, but there's something we can do. We can put some legislation behind it, but it's just sad, but it's happening every day not just in Nashville, but across the country. And it's just unfortunate.
I wholeheartedly agree. No one has put a question in the chat, but I know you're going to stick around. So if something pops
Yes.
up, then we will get back to you towards the end. I think that will be because maybe people are processing all of this.
I do have something that I would like for Deidre to mention,
Perfect.
Deidre, if you don't mind. How I would like for you to talk about how you basically set this out. This is your second time you were going to run for president. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. You know, our national president, you know, actually recruited me and asked me to consider running a few years back. And she had unfinished business with the caucus. And so I, you know, of course I support her and wanted her to run for another term. And I decided at that point that maybe I wanted to run for the mayor of Memphis. And so I stepped back and became the president of the Tennessee caucus. But because I'd served on the national board before, I thought it was important to train my president-elect, who now serves on the national board, because I've had that experience. And so when Donna shared with me that she was going to step down as president, she gave me a call to let me know and ask if I was still interested. And I said, absolutely, because she had done such a wonderful job, and that I feel like I can expand and build on what she's already created. Hence, that's the reason I made the announcement at our annual meeting that I was running.
And one more quick follow-up question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiana. If you are elected, will you be the first African-American woman?
You know, that's a good question. And I will ask Donna. I believe that there may have been someone from Seattle, an African-American female who worked for Starbucks.
Oh,
That may, but I'm going to check on that. And I'll let you know, Tiana, I'll let you know. I may be the first African-American, but not woman of color, because I know Lulu Flores and some others have, you know, served as president.
well, wonderful. Thank you, Deidre, so much for joining us. I am going to switch to our next speaker. So I'm going to, let me just do this, and we're going to do this, and I'm going to welcome Joan. Joan Gentry is from the League of Women Voters, and you are going to give us some updates on the initiative petition process. Is that right?
That's right. You know, as I thought about what I ought to be talking about this evening, I know that most of the women on this, you know, at this meeting are very knowledgeable about what's going on right now. So I know I have a sense that we are going to be facing this on a ballot, and we're going to be working like crazy, educating folks as to what's really going on. I thought maybe my role might be just to kind of take us back a little bit and remind everyone of what we are all about when we talk about the initiative petition. And so I just thought I'd start with some things like Medicaid expansion, the Hancock Amendment. That was one of those amendments that, as a teacher back in 1980, I fought like crazy, but it passed anyway. We have medical marijuana, redistricting. All of these are mechanisms by which the initiative petition came into play. And we have now on the books, whether it's in the Constitution or whether it's statutory, we have the results of those efforts. So basically, if we are strong believers in the fact that as Missouri citizens, we do have the right to amend the Missouri Constitution, to amend or write laws, then we are true believers in the concept of the initiative petition. Just a little bit of a review about the fact that it's not easy. I mean, we see people out, you know, they are collecting signatures, and we know, we talk with those folks and they'll say, I've gotten 10 today. And we think, oh, wow, you know, you've been out here for 6 hours in the rain or in the heat. In Springfield, Missouri, you may be getting some negative comments from folks and so on, and yet you are out here doing this. So I just thought we would do a really quick review of what the initiative petition is all about here in Missouri. And I think the first thing that we need to remember is that there is a pamphlet that you can get at the Missouri Secretary of State's office that's called Make Your Voice Heard, Missouri's initiative petition process. I think this is its first basic statement is, and I think this is very ironic considering how much pushback there is right now among legislators as to the initiative process. But the first statement in the book is, the initiative petition process gives Missouri citizens the opportunity to directly participate in our government. That's the first sentence, and that's what we all believe very strongly. And you would be surprised when you start looking at all of the reasons as to why the initiative petition is always under the gun to be changed. Just a very quick review, you have to get a petition written, which means that you need to have someone or a group of someones who are very knowledgeable in how to go about writing petitions, dotting all the I's, dotting all the T's, checking the legality of what your petition is about, just to barely get started. Once you do that, you've got all those forms to fill out. And all of this is highlighted in the pamphlet that comes from the Secretary of State's office. But you have forms to fill out. You have to submit your petition under a time, there are dates that you have to follow, and you have to submit it to the Secretary of State's office. It has to be reviewed by the Attorney General. It has to go to the auditor. Somewhere along the line, somebody makes a decision and says, we are going to accept this one or we're going to reject it. If it's rejected, you're back to square one. If it's accepted, then you got the lovely thing called the ballot summary language, and you hope that you get a fair paragraph written about what your petition is all about. Fiscal note gets prepared, then it gets certified, and it's now ready to be circulated. And so then you have to have a cadre of people, some of who can be paid, most of them are, however, volunteers who just go out and collect signatures in at this point, in 6 of the 8 congressional districts that we have. So if we were collecting signatures in 7th district where I live right now, the minimum number for a constitutional amendment would be 107,246 valid signatures. That's the very basic minimum, meaning that you're going to have to collect thousands more than that, because not every one of those signatures is going to be valid. Once those signatures are collected and you turn them into the Secretary of State's office and they get certified, somebody does all the checking and says yes on this signature and no on that signature. You hope you end up with enough that lets your petition be certified. It can then be put on the ballot, and then we start the whole education process. At this point, of course, a petition would pass with a simple majority, the same way the House and the Senate in Missouri are able to pass bills, a simple majority. So you would then, go educating people and hoping they will vote in the way that will support your petition. Here in Southwest Missouri, and I think one of the reasons that I was asked about speaking down here, we are, with the exception of Springfield, we mimic the rest of the rural parts of Missouri. We're very strongly Republican and very conservative for the most part. Here in Springfield, we're fortunate in that we're beginning to take on an identity of our own. As you probably know, we have 3 state representatives now from Springfield, and of Springfield proper, that's 3 out of 5, so that's good. However, we are surrounded by very conservative representatives who have a big impact on what happens to us in Springfield here and Southwest Missouri and the whole state. It seems like there's always an effort to do something about the initiative petition. It's like thistle. I don't know if you know what thistle is, but if you're a farmer, you know you don't want thistle to come up in your fields. And every spring you have to get rid of the thistle because you know they're going to pop up again, and they will the next year. And that's exactly the way the initiative petition does in our legislature. This is not the first time there's been an attempt to make it so difficult to work with the initiative petition process that we would almost, be just as well to become one of those states where nothing is available for it because it keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. I think this year we will probably, and I think Nancy and Marilyn and a couple other people that I see frequently on Zoom will probably agree. Chances are we are going to have in 2024 an initiative petition that deals with the constitutional amendment, changing that to require 60% votes for passage. There have been any number of bills introduced, filed this spring and this session, some of them looking at 66% to pass, some of them wanting signatures collected in all 8, some wanting signatures collected from 50% of registered voters in a district. There have been some really heinous kinds of things going on. I think I can't help but feel that the legislature, the folks that are pushing this are thinking, oh, we've had all these bad things coming out. I bet we can just stick this 60% on just constitutional amendments. I say everything else is the same. But folks, it's not the same. There's no reason to change it. And I think that's what we need to share with voters. There is absolutely no reason to change what we have now. It works. It works well. We are not overburdened with changes being made as the result of citizens being involved in the initiative process. It's not that easy. So to be sold a bill of goods by saying, oh, 60% it's just for constitutional amendments because we don't want our Constitution to grow so much is a total use of misinformation, disinformation, and a lot of bull is what I would like to call it. So anyway, that's kind of where we are here in Southwest Missouri with the initiative petition process and what's happening in Jefferson City.
I have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
One is from Margot. She would like to know if you could explain why Secretary Ashcroft is being sued for rejecting initiative petition ballot language. And then I'll ask you the next one in a minute.
Okay. So my understanding would be that his ballot language is not an accurate portrayal of what a petition is all about. For example, in 2020, I think, when the legislature put back on the ballot the redistricting to do away with the redistricting portion of Clean Missouri, the first thing they put on the ballot, the first sentence had nothing to do with redistricting. It wasn't until you got down to the last ballot, the last paragraph, that it actually got to the meat of the whole bill. The first statement was something along the lines of, we will no longer allow any kind of gifts being given to politicians or something along those lines, which was totally misleading because it was already down to $5, And so if we look at the bill that's being written now that does with constitutional amendments, the very first sentence has nothing to do with a constitutional amendment. The second sentence doesn't either. It's only when you get down into the third portion of that writing that it really talks about the constitutional amendment and 60%. The first statement is something about changing the constitutional statement about citizens and voting. And it's in terms of the words, the phrase all citizen, it's changing the phrase all citizens to only citizens. I think that's an emotional ploy. People will read that sentence and think, oh yeah, we don't want to have anyone who is not a citizen voting. So we need to change that, all citizens to vote, to only citizens can vote, you know, that kind of, I don't know if that answered your questions, but that's where I think that's headed.
No, I think it does. I know I lived in Washington State, and while I don't totally remember whether we had an initiative petition process, but part of our voting process was that when something was on the ballot, we would get the verbiage written out,
Right.
and then we would have someone who was for it and someone who was against it write a summary of what it meant and why.
Right.
And I felt like it was very transparent and informational, and it allowed, you know, someone to make a more educated decision. I feel very
Right.
strongly that in Missouri, we're doing everything we possibly can to be as confusing as possible on purpose.
Right. I agree. And that's what that's about. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My second question is, so what can we do? Is there some sort of, you know, action that you can ask of us? Are there people we should be writing to? Are there people, what can we do? How can we help?
Right now, of course, I think writing, sending emails, calling your legislators, I mean, tracking bills, and just always getting counted. I think it helps to be counted. Not that I think in the long run it's going to make any difference, but if we don't make ourselves heard all of the time, then, you know, I think it devalues what we're all about in terms of, this is our government. We are as smart as those folks in Jefferson City. We have as much of an ability to understand what they're doing. And they're, you know, they're not elite folks up there. So we just, by consistently communicating that to them.
I agree. And as a person from New York, and I'm not shy either, so I get you. We have to be heard. Joan, cannot thank you enough. Obviously, you're going to stick around. So if at the end we have any other questions for you, so appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next I am going to, let me see if I can do this real quick. I'm going to bring in Dana. And okay, we'll go. Okay, welcome, Dana. So Dana Sandweiss is here on behalf of Access Mo. And thank you so much for coming tonight. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the reproductive freedom legislation going on and how we can help.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you for inviting me to speak tonight to the group. As you all know, when Roe v. Wade's protections were removed this past summer by the U.S. Supreme Court in Dobbs v. Jackson, Missouri was the first state to activate its trigger ban that banned all abortion access in Missouri with very few exceptions. Despite this ban on virtually all abortions in our state, our legislature is still tacking Planned Parenthood and access to abortion care in Missouri. This session, 3 bills were introduced in the Senate to block Medicaid patients' access to care at Planned Parenthood, which violates Medicaid's free choice of provider provision in federal law and thus jeopardizing funding for Missouri's entire health net program. Planned Parenthood, as you all know, or don't know, plays a vital role in Missouri's health net or healthcare safety net, providing thousands of patients access and comprehensive high quality care. In fact, in 2021, Planned Parenthood Health Centers served 52% of patients who depend on Missouri's family planning net system. These bills would disproportionately impact people of color who are forced to rely on publicly funding programs and are part of a long line of attempts to dismantle access to preventative care, including birth control, STI testing, and other reproductive health care treatments. Another bill was introduced into the Senate this session in an attempt to amend the Missouri Constitution to specifically provide that there's no right to abortion care in Missouri. So this is like we were just speaking about, through an initiative petition process. The legislature has an easier time of putting a question to amend the Constitution on the ballot than the voters do. And this effort would mean was meant to preempt future abortion access in Missouri and eliminate any constitutional rights to abortion in Missouri. Even though year after year, polling shows that a majority of Missourians do not support political interference in access to reproductive health care, including abortion. In fact, 7 in 10 Missourians oppose political interference in abortion access. It's an essential and part of reproductive health care here in Missouri. Thankfully, those are the only bills that I'm aware of. I went and testified against them that are moving through the session right now, and they're actually not moving right now that I'm aware of. Sadly, there are other issues that the legislature is focused on and that some of the other speakers tonight are going to talk about. But in terms of legislative update, that's what we have right now, the session. Of course, any of these bills can continue to move. And as they do, we'll keep you updated.
Dana, thank you so much. It's interesting because it almost feels like, I mean, they're moving all those things through, I guess, in an effort to, I mean, they've already outlawed it, so they don't really have to move anything along other than, I guess, to make people feel like they're protecting the fact that they already did this. But I mean, I remember being on the campaign last year and knocking on a door and asking the constituent, you know, what matters to them, and they were anti-choice. And I said, okay, well, we already have that. Is there anything else you're interested in? And he said, no, just that. And so I can't tell whether that's, you know, why they're bothering with these Senate bills. If they're really not going to go anywhere, and they've obviously got other things like Katy's going to talk about in a minute, that they're pushing through for other ridiculous reasons. So what can we do? I mean, obviously, I know you're going to say things like go down and testify, but sometimes people can't do that. So tell us things that are tangible that we can rally around.
Well, I think, you know, staying in touch with activist groups on the ground, like National Women's Political Caucus, Planned Parenthood advocates, Pro-Choice Missouri, Access Missouri, that when things come up, ACLU Missouri as well, when bills are starting to move forward, they will prompt everybody and let them know it's time to kind of reach out to your legislators. You know, continuing to kind of what we were talking about with before with the initiative petition process, voice your opinion and continue to voice your opinion and support these organizations that are advocating for reproductive health care and abortion access in Missouri. And trying to build more base on the ground. I think legislators, I think the reason we're not seeing too much move right now is number one, as you said, abortion access is virtually non-existent in our state and has been for a long time. But also I think that some of the legislatures, this last election cycle, we made some movement on our side, and you can look across the state or across the country actually this last election that Americans and Missourians do not support these extreme bans. And you can tell by the election results, not only in Missouri, where we were able to flip a few seats and move the state a bit more to the direction of being more supportive of abortion access. The legislators realize that it's not that popular and they want to stay in power. So I think they're introducing these bills to still, you know, be relevant in this space and appeal to their base. But as we know, they're focused on other issues at this time. We don't know if these are going to activate and start moving, but at this point, they're not.
So I'm getting a couple of questions. Do you know the bill numbers for those three, just in case people would like to try and track those and you know, call their senators and let them know?
Yeah, let me pull them up and I'll put them in the chat. I don't have them right in front of me. It'll take me 2
That's
minutes
fine.
to pull it up.
You do that while Katy's talking in a minute. Let me also say, is there an IP for abortion rights to be added to the Constitution?
So there is an effort that is underway. There on March 8th, a retired doctor filed 11 abortion rights constitutional amendments, proposed constitutional amendments with the Missouri Secretary of State. The doctor is part of Missourians for Constitutional Freedom. You can see the language on the Secretary of State's websites. The Secretary of State has 54 days from the date at which they were filed to submit ballot summary language to the campaign, to the Missouri for Constitutional Freedom, which puts it at May 1st. If the campaign proceeds, Missouri voters will be asked if they want to add a right to abortion access into the Missouri Constitution on the 24 ballot. So there's many more steps to move to go through. But at least it's been filed and it is moving.
So when you say that they filed 11 of them, is that giving us options so that we can play with that? Like, so we would event, and I say we, like I have anything, we would move with whichever one we think has the best shot?
Right. I believe how the process usually works is I think it's common to file lots of very, numerous options to keep the window open and do some polling on the different options. And also when the ballot summary language comes back, what's most favorable based on the polling, and potentially have to litigate the ballot summary language if it's not favorable. And I kind of foresee that happening given who our Missouri Secretary of State is and that he's opposed to access to abortion.
Right. And let me ask you one other question, and this is just a timing game. So if
Sure.
if the conservative side is trying to get rid of the initiative petition, and that process would take us to the 24 ballot, and the liberal side is trying to use the initiative petition to help to secure access to abortion, which would also be on the 24 ballot. If the initiative petition fails and we lose the ability to have the initiative petition process, this is our one shot.
Well, assuming this moves forward and assuming amending the Constitution to make the ballot initiative process harder, they can't affect it, as far as I know. They can't affect the ballot, the collection of signatures. So I think maybe some of the versions that have been introduced would increase the number of signatures, or so
it's not impossible, it's just harder and more.
It's hard. Well, they could affect the amount of votes necessary. So if they amend to provide 60%, raise the percentage of votes needed to pass in August, that would affect the abortion rights ballot initiative if it's on the November ballot. And the governor has the power to decide which ballot the initiative petitions can be placed on. So whether it be August or November.
Okay. Dana, thank you so much. Obviously, you're going to be around towards the end in case anybody has any questions, but thank you so much for all your wise words. Okay, now I've lost Katy. There she is. Hang on. And I'm going to do this. So I would like to now welcome Katy Erker-Lynch, who is the Executive Director for Promo. And we are going to hear from you about an update on LGBTQ legislation that is unfortunately going on right now. Thank you so much, Katy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So for folks who are not familiar with Promo, we are Missouri's LGBTQ plus policy and advocacy organization. We've been around for 36 years, so you've probably heard our name if you've been around Missouri politics for a while. Our work really seeks to confront systemic inequities, to liberate the full spectrum of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community from discrimination and oppression. Last year in 2022, there were about 18 bills filed that explicitly attacked LGBTQ plus rights. And Missouri was one of the states that had the highest number of bills attacking our freedoms and rights. And states all around us passed those bills. In particular, you heard a lot about anti-trans bills. Missouri did not. Our coalition partners, held the line and we defeated those bills. But in 2023, conservatively, we've had 37 bills filed explicitly attacking the rights and freedoms of LGBTQ plus Missourians. The way Promo thinks a bit more intersectionally and broadly, we identify actually about 50 bills that really target the LGBTQ plus community. So it just kind of depends on how broadly you interpret that. But they come in the form of healthcare bans, both for youth and adults, education bills that kind of masquerade as parents' bills of rights or teachers' bills of rights and are actually forced outing bills. And then the inability for folks to amend their birth certificates and athlete bans, which you've probably heard quite a lot about. What's really challenging is that the Attorney General is leading administrative attacks against gender affirming healthcare at the same time that the legislature is. And you all probably heard about or read the article in the Free Press that called for an immediate moratorium on gender affirming care in Missouri, specifically at St. Louis Children's WashU's Gender Center. The claims in that article are uninvestigated or under investigation and also are uncorroborated, but they're being treated as absolute fact on the Senate floor. And they're being used in really violent ways that have emboldened a lot of hateful rhetoric and have done a lot of harm already. And the Attorney General has continued to hurt the community by threatening to introduce really politicized emergency regulations that could be interpreted by healthcare institutions, by individual providers that would maybe make it so that they would ban access to gender affirming care as well. The reality is most youth who are in Missouri receiving gender affirming care are not on puberty blockers or receiving hormone replacement therapy, but are meeting with social workers, are getting social emotional support, and are keeping the pathways open to have access to really life-saving healthcare, should that be the right course for them. And in Missouri, there's a real effort to mislead everyone about what gender affirming care is. A lot of the rhetoric on the Senate floor by the bill filers in particular has been repeating, honestly, just outright lies about how children's bodies are being mutilated is a lot of the language that they're using. And I was really happy to see that WPATH, which is the World Professional Association of Transgender Health Providers, they put out a statement really condemning what our Attorney General did. I want you all to know that it's a gross overreach of his powers as well. Like we would need to have, evidence that shows that Missourians are complaining or have been harmed. And as far as we know, we've not seen any of that. We imagine that these regulations will come sometime in the next week or so. But the very definition of an emergency rule in Missouri is one that is needed because of an immediate danger. And last year in the fall, Promo actually awarded the two doctors who were the co-founders of the Gender Center champion awards for using evidence-based best practice medicine to protect some of the most vulnerable LGBTQ plus Missourians, and that's trans youth in the state. We've worked with hundreds of families who have been through the Gender Center and really value the ethic of care and the work that they bring to their work. So there's a lot that you've probably heard in the news. I'm sure people have some specific questions. The bills that we are fighting most, relentlessly are the two that have crossed over from the Senate to the House, and that's Senate Bill 49. It was sponsored by Moon, but it was also sponsored. They all want to claim that they hurt trans kids. So it was also co-sponsored, but not as a co-sponsor, as a sponsor by Hoskins and freshman Jill Carter. And then Senate Bill 39 was an athlete ban. rather is an athlete ban, actually filed by Senator Holly Thompson Raider, who we have done great work with before in terms of harm reduction. And so it was really surprising to see this come from her. It's an athlete ban, and that ban in particular is so broad and poorly written that it would apply to all ages for any child ever playing sports. So starting with, pre-kindergartners who might be playing on a sport, all the way up through college. And it actually violates the NCAA policies such that Mizzou would be unable to compete in the SEC. So we imagine both of those bills will be amended at both SB 39 and SB 49. There's a lot we don't know about the Attorney General. And in a crazy twist of turns, I don't know how to phrase it, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., we will be hearing SB 60, which is MONA, the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, filed by Senator Razor of Kansas City, the only out gay senator we have in Missouri. And this is, I think, the 26th hearing we've heard of those 37 bills. So it's been every single week, with the exception of 2 weeks this session, every single week that we have had an anti-LGBTQ bill heard in either the Senate or the House. Certain senators and Republicans, but I would say the entire Republican caucus, has made it very clear that hurting trans kids is their number one priority. And I think that it's okay to have questions about what it means to be gender diverse or gender expansive. And I'm happy to have folks, ask any questions that you all have. But when it comes down to it, they're trying to deny life-saving medicine in the exact same way that they did the abortion bans in Missouri. And it's the exact same playbook. So I think something that many of you are already familiar with. In terms of what you can do, which I know is what Melissa will ask me next, we have a protest tomorrow. So if you are available, we will be protesting outside of the Capitol on the lawn at 2 p.m. And Melissa, I'll put a couple of links in the chat if you don't mind sharing them with everybody. We have transportation, Joan from Southwest Mo, if you'd like to hop on the bus. We'll be leaving from Springfield, Kansas City, and St. Louis. And I would ask if we do still have ample space on our buses that are leaving from Springfield and Kansas City. So if you are on social media, I put in the chat, and Melissa can copy over because for some reason I can't send to everybody.
No worries.
The 2 links that are to sign up for transportation. Our Springfield bus is not full, and we would love to have more folks join us. And then the last thing is, and for this group in particular, especially if folks are not all in St. Louis, because I think our senators have heard from us, and not all in Kansas City, to call your senators and speak with them about your opposition to these bills in particular. Melissa already put that there's Senate bills 49 and 39. You can call your own senator. I think that would be very valuable, because it's likely that they will hand this back to them. But we believe that the bills will probably go to Alex Riley's General Laws Committee. He heard a 9-hour hearing of 8 different anti-LGBTQ bills. They were the drag bans, if you saw any of that media coverage, as well as the education bills and healthcare bans in the House. So there is a House, not a companion bill, it's not identical, but there is a bill in the House that Hudson filed that they've already heard. But there are several moderate Republicans who very clearly don't want to do this. And that's Riley, Lavasco, Reuter, and Mathieson. And if you are in their district, definitely call them. If you're not in their district but have friends who are, please ask them to call. So happy to answer any questions that folks have.
So I know that obviously the 2 that you're talking about, can you just go into a little detail, because people might not know what MONA is? So for SB 60, can you just
Sure. Yeah, I'll say that you all know that when a bill gets a hearing after spring break, it's not very likely to move forward. So SB 60 is MONA, the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, which would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the Missouri HRA, such that there would be a protected class for sexual orientation and gender identity. In our major metropolitan areas, our municipalities have kind of created like a patchwork of non-discrimination protections. So looking really, it's really like when you look at Jackson County, Kansas City, St. Louis City, St. Louis County. But Springfield, for example, has been unable to successfully pass this through a number of different efforts, and it's been really painful for the community. And smaller municipalities do have protections as well, but there are a lot of federal protections that cover Missourians who are LGBTQ plus. However, in Missouri, we could still be denied public accommodations, financial supports like applying for a loan, housing, et cetera, because of our sexual orientation or gender identity. And we're in company with about half of the country that we don't have those state protections. So MONA would provide those protections. And I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I don't feel particularly hopeful given the current climate towards trans and queer folks that MONA is going to move forward. But we have pushed for it for, I think, 26 years now, and we won't stop fighting for it because it's basic human dignity.
Absolutely. And yes, all of that. Yes. And as a former teacher, it always sickens me when we're talking about these things for children. Not that this is okay that we're doing this to adults, but like you said, these are our most vulnerable. And they're developing, like these are children, and that's all I can, that's it. I can't, there's nothing I can say about that. We did have a comment from Sarah. I don't think there's a question to this, but let me just read it to you. Over here on the west side, Jalen Anderson, the first district at large Jackson County legislator, introduced and promoted a conversion therapy ban to apply to the entire county. Kansas City and Independence already have this, but Jalen's proposed legislation would hold offenders more accountable and apply to the entire county. In a weird twist, only one other Democrat on the legislature voted in support of this. The 2 Republicans on the legislature voted for the ban, and the five other Democrats voted against it. It seems to be about consolidating their own power, not the children who are being abused and harmed by the conversion therapy. Thoughts?
This is a really complicated question, and I'm going to stay away from the infighting of Jackson County Dems and speak a bit more to the statute. So as it currently stands, conversion therapy bans passed at the local level are not really enforceable, and that's because of state law. And there might be folks on this call that know more about it and could answer to this question a little bit better. But the reality is the way that the code is written, as I understand it, neither of these current proposals are particularly enforceable. And so there is political posturing, I think, in Jackson County because of that. Now, are they symbolically meaningful? Yes. Does it scare people away from conversion therapy practices? Absolutely. Is that something that we support? Absolutely. But what happens often when counties, and this is a controversial thing, I'm just going to name that, when counties pass local ordinances, is that the legislature slaps back and they say, we're going to make conversion therapy legal across the entire state. And because of the supermajority that we have, they make things a lot worse and harder for a lot of rural Missourians. And so this is a really super complicated issue. And now you add on the layer of some infighting between Dems, and I think it's gotten even more complicated. I also just want to name that I'm not an expert on either of those pieces of local legislation, and people have asked me about it. And the truth is that we've been so stretched in the legislature over the past couple of weeks that I haven't been able to be as present to that fight as I would have liked to be.
Okay,
But
well,
good
we are
question.
going to absolutely forgive you because you are working your you-know-what off, so you're fine, Katie, you're fine. Interestingly, Sarah also commented that Jalen apparently himself was subjected to conversion therapy as a child, so that might be part of where that's coming from. Katie, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's so important. We obviously will be having another speaker series, like I said, in 2 weeks. You can go to the statewide caucus website to join. You can also get our newsletter. You can make a donation to help fund all of this. I would also like to say that, you know, any of the organizations that participated here tonight are probably also very deserving of your support. And if you would like to learn more about the lawsuit that is currently going on in Missouri regarding abortion access, you can do that at au.org, americansunited.org. So I just want to thank you all so much. I'm sorry we went a couple minutes over, but I think it was absolutely worth it. Thank you very much, and hopefully we will see you all again in 2 weeks.